Of course, I think a lot of us are open to the rough idea that there was an ancient, advanced culture, Atlantis and Hyperborea perhaps, and maybe the seeders of knowledge we've heard about were Caucasian-looking people from these civilizations. Maybe they were escaping the destruction of their own culture from these parasites, or maybe natural disasters as well. And maybe they spread out and integrated into less civilized cultures to pass on their knowledge and rebuild their world. A struggle they've been having ever since. Maybe this was a back and forth that was finally laid to rest with the Reformation and the European expansion and the Inquisition and colonialism and the Spanish conquest. Is it possible? Could these have all been aspects of one campaign? Could it be that something more epic and not so distant was hidden away over that period of time? Could the genie have been put back in the bottle just a few hundred years ago? Is a campaign of this magnitude feasible? I think it is. I think it could have been done. And maybe cultures we think just died out or disappeared were slaughtered and then moved further into the past. It sounds weird, but we're faced with so many things that don't make sense. What happened to that true psychedelic basis for religions in ancient times? What happened to all those megalithic sites? What's the deal with all the artifacts and clay pots and kids' toys from the past that have dinosaurs on them? We talked about a few of them in the Plus show, but they're there. And maybe something happened just a few thousand years ago that destroyed these advanced cultures, radically altered the planet, killed off the larger reptiles that may have been normal at one time, and caused the catalyst to build all these underground tunnels and cities around the planet. I mean, hell, just realizing that humans could have walked with dinosaurs. And I'm not talking about creationist stuff. In fact, a lot of these guys and the flat earth guys are going in this direction that dinosaurs never existed, that it's all a fabrication. But I've seen artifacts that depict dinosaurs, and places like the Smithsonian won't display them, and I think there's a reason for that. And it's not because they were made up. But even this notion that dinosaurs and megamammals lived with man in the moderate past is enough to justify the huge tunnel systems. And we've even heard of giants too. How would you hide from man-eating giants in the ancient Americas? Most likely underground. I don't know. And I'm no expert, clearly. But when Sylvier was talking about the Arctic regions and the Sahara Desert in the Plus show, it really struck a chord with me. I'm becoming more open to a radically recent cataclysm, and with that, it's easier to understand how a parasitic elite could dominate humanity into such a position of servitude and ignorance as we're in today. Maybe this manipulation hasn't lasted throughout humanity's timeline, but humanity's timeline has been altered to reflect that it has, and with it, the psychological acceptance that this is how it's always been, and probably always will be, is just the icing on the cake. Ask yourself if you think this is possible. Before the time of the internet or the telephone or the car or the plane, could a powerful group amass enough resources to pull this off? Well, we talked about the Roman Empire being a fabrication, and how interesting we're told that it lasted from like 700 BC to 1453, 64 years before the Reformation. So if you have a period of time where you want to rewrite history and establish a certain dominance, you pretty much have to leave the last 60 years alone because people are still alive. But 64 years is about the time you could start making history up. But in the meantime, 1478, we have the Spanish Inquisition. 1492, we have Columbus in America. A few short years later, 1518, Cortez in Mexico. Could this be all part of the same elite and the same campaign, the same parasite making sure that their way is the only way, their history is the only history? I think it's possible. I mean, just 200 years from then, we have World War I, which really was just a conflict between ruling elite who were in the same family. They were cousins. So how did that happen? How was that established? Honestly, guys, I'm just a stoner out of my depth here. I'm not a historian. And I'd like to talk to a historian open-minded enough to consider these ideas, but usually when someone studies something for a long time, they put more and more stock in it, except those radical few who are then marginalized by the system. Either way, I think it's amazing stuff. A global coup of humanity meant to wipe out knowledge of our peaceful past, the enlightened leaders of Atlantis, and the knowledge of this parasitic invasion that still rules us from the shadows. I mean, that speaks to my core. Of course, it parallels with other ideas that are well known to conspiracy enthusiasts, but with a sour fruity twist. The underground cities and tunnels, ancient maps, the hollow earth, the recent winterization of the polar regions, the idea that the Sahara Desert might not be as natural as we think, these kind of geographical oddities to me are the most fascinating. We also talked about dinosaurs and mammoths, the power of manifestation,